Did the judge in Diddy's case act as the 13th juror? Was he biased against Diddy? You have a lot of people saying, yes, that's the case, including Diddy's legal defense team. Oh, yeah. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Blackjack. Life is like those cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor. Hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe to the channel. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of this straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday was a monumental moment in hip hop. We've seen the judicial system at work. A lot of people believe unfairly at work, including Diddy's legal defense team, his all-star legal defense team. And let's break that down. So Diddy was convicted of two charges of the Mann Act, violating the Mann Act, right? Under the circumstances, the defense team felt like 21 months, 20 months would have been adequate, right? Diddy had been locked up, and most people are saying for 14 months, according to Diddy's attorney. And when I was broadcasting live, gavel to gavel, and all of the testimony that was given, you can check my live for that if you want to, go through that. And according to his lawyer, he was locked up approximately 12 months and 17 days. He's been locked up for 12 months and 17 days at the Metropolitan Detention Center. And so the judge came down with a sentence. The prosecution was asking for 11 years. The judge came down. So you said 135 months. The judge came down with 50 months, basically with time served for how much time Diddy, had then, how would the federal guidelines work as far as that, the things that we know about it and the things that we don't know. But according to his lawyer, he was in MDC for 12 months and 17 days. So this would be 12 months and 18 days. Okay. And so the Judge Subramanian, he came down with a sentence of 50 months. But it wasn't that got Diddy's legal team up in arms. It was the words that he used, and they felt like Diddy was being punished for things that he had been acquitted of, that he was found not guilty of, if you will. And so in that and looking at that, right, we're going to dive deep into the fallout, because it's, like I said, a lot of people, some people were very happy. Cassie's lawyer, they wrote letters, saying what they felt about it. And it just seems to me like the judge never wanted to give Diddy a chance at bail. None of the things that, any normal person who was a first time offender would be giving the privilege of. Like I said, people, the Abercrombie and Finch situation, that guy, he was a white guy. He was granted bail, ladies and gentlemen. I think it was $10 million, right? He was granted bail. Diddy, on the other hand, first time offender, was not granted bail. And, one can argue, with the Cassie tape and say, well, he was violent on the Cassie tape. But Diddy was actually free when he settled the lawsuit with Cassie and gave her what we thought at one time was $20 or $30 million, but it turned out to be $20 million. He was free, settled that. Like I said, he thought it was behind him, because what we didn't know is the evidence and the videos and all of the things that was really going on, not the one at the Intercontinental Hotel, but the alleged freak-off videos and what, the media had pumped as these through different people these videos with underage boys, underage girl, all of these things that they were saying in the media. None of those things turned out to be true, right? What was happening, as we know, is Diddy was, hiring male sex workers to then participate in sex acts with him and his longtime girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, also Jane, also known as Daphne Joy, right? So with that being said, when it ultimately broke down, Diddy was convicted of 2 charges of the Mann Act, 12 months, 17 days, teaching people in MDC. He had a little thing he was doing. The defense team recommended domestic violence class, drug rehab, and Diddy was prepared, which I thought was what would you call it? Presumptuous of him to basically, schedule some kind of meeting or speech for October 6th. I'm like, you don't even know if you're going home yet. So I thought that was kind of presumptuous of him, if you will. But he was doing what he was doing. Somebody by the name of Giovanni came and spoke in court, talking about his past and that Diddy would be a great help in trying to teach people and talking about domestic violence as well as drug use. I thought that was a bit premature for Diddy. Like I said, you've been off drugs 12 months that we know of, from that understanding. And so now, when it came time for sentencing, the judge seemed to me to be a bit harsh based on, like I said, what they wanted him to be convicted of versus what he was actually convicted of, right? And so Diddy's attorneys, after the sentencing, they went down in front of the courtroom and they let it be known, after getting 50 months in federal prison for 2 prostitution-related convictions, ladies and gentlemen. You got to understand, it's 2 prostitution-related convictions. Diddy was not convicted of domestic violence, right? Although the prosecution did state a case in where one cannot be convicted of things, or should, I would say, convicted of things that they were acquitted of or found not guilty of. But there was a case in which they said the court can consider that, if you will. And so, like I said, once again, I've been telling people that Cassie tape was a domestic violence case in Los Angeles, which she refused to prosecute at the time. She was asked by the security guard at the Intercontinental Hotel, did she want to call the police? Did she want to press charges? She said no. She just wanted to get out of there, according to the security guard from the Intercontinental Hotel who testified during the trial. Now, Diddy's defense team is basically calling foul, claiming Judge Arun Subramanian punished him for crimes he was actually acquitted of, right? Now, this case, like I said, has been shaken up or has shook up the entertainment and legal world. So let's break it down piece by piece, fact by fact, no bias, just straight game, ladies and gentlemen, right? So here's what went down. The judge sentenced Diddy to just over 4 years in federal prison, plus a $500,000 fine. So Diddy got a $500,000 fine, right? He's already served about a year. Like I said, once again, according to his lawyer, 12 months and 17 days, or, as I make this video, 12 months and 18 days, right? So he's got roughly, 3 years left to serve, if you will. But like I said, what's crazy about this is Diddy's legal team says he's being punished, for things the jury said he didn't do. And like I said, this is where you come in as the viewer and try to understand and break it down. Like I said, you can look at the, like I said, we did the gavel coverage. It was approximately 7 hours. I was on live. I was live for 7 hours covering each and every statement that was made in regards to this situation, right? So the lead defense attorney, Teny Geragos, told ABC News, right? And I quote, "The jury made it clear, not guilty means not guilty. he was acquitted of sex trafficking and RICO. And that is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. And they're saying, and Judge Subramanian basically acted like a 13th juror, punishing him based on allegations and not convictions. Now, that's a bold statement. That's a real bold statement, right? And it opens up a whole new discussion about judicial overreach versus moral accountability. And like I said, it's a lot of times, judges can, not do what they're supposed to do, and this is the thing about being human. They can use their own personal bias and things, and instead of, going by the law, and what they're supposed to go by is the law, and just remove their feelings and what they're feeling, their emotions, their personal biases and all of those things. This is an ongoing thing in dealing with court and dealing with legal proceedings and things of that nature, right? So, like I said, Diddy's defense team saying that the judge acted as a 13th juror is not the first time this has been said. This is not the first time. And so, once again, what usually is a remedy to this is an appeal. And so Diddy team has said that they will appeal this case, right? Right? But like I said, it opens up a whole new discussion about judicial overreach versus moral accountability. Now, Donald Trump, has talked about he'll consider whether somebody was unfairly treated and things like that. I don't know if he's looking at this Diddy case in any kind of way, but, we shall see what we shall see, if you will, right? So Diddy's defense team's position, right? Attorney Alexandra Shapiro, who's handling Diddy's appeal. And let me tell you about this. Alexandra Shapiro, she's a monster as far as this appeals court thing goes. I think she's won the last 3 appeals that she's filed in the 2nd District of New York. Alexandra Shapiro is a hell of an attorney. And a lot of times she remains quiet about certain situations. But yesterday she spoke up. She went even further. She said the sentence was driven by conduct the jury rejected. The jury acquitted Mr. Combs of coercion, yet the judge still treated him like he was guilty of it, right? She's arguing that the sentencing judge ignored the verdict and instead punished Diddy based on emotional reaction. And that's what I'm trying to say. We're human. We see a lot of times, in police brutality cases, or we can see videos and things like that. You see a person who's supposed to be a law enforcement official, right? Being overly aggressive, because we're only human. And so, like I said, once again, it's never looked at like that until one really gives a sit down and removes their own personal biases and feelings based on race, emotional, socioeconomics, and all of those other things, that one can truly, honestly be fair in dealing with a situation. This is what Alexandra Shapiro is basically talking about, right? And she's saying that instead of punishing Diddy for what he was actually convicted of, right? She's saying that the judge ignored the verdict and punished Diddy based on emotional reaction, especially given the testimony from Cassie and other women. You got to understand that. And let's be real. When a case involves high-profile names, fame, and power, judges do feel that public pressure. I think that was part of it too, the public pressure. But let's be clear. When you think about what Cassie and them testified, they were participants in this. Jane testified she was using freak-offs to her advantage. You understand what I'm saying? This was not something that they were coerced into doing, right? And that was clear. So once again, this is where Alexandra Shapiro, Teny, Geragos, Mark Agnafalo, and Diddy's defense team, that's where they're coming from with their argument. So like I said, that's the elephant in the room, if you will, right? Now, the prosecution, to their point, right? On the flip side, the prosecution said Diddy's history shows repeated violence and abuse towards women, right? Now, once again, I would have to disagree with that based on the fact that Jane, that being Joy, testified that she basically, provoked violence and was violent towards Diddy in the time that they had a situation in dealing with violence. She was the one who was the instigator, antagonist in that situation, and the judge completely ignored that. You understand what I'm saying? And like I said, some people put themselves up there as higher than thou, but God humbles us all, in due time. And so once again, this is the situation. Also overlooked was the fact that Diddy was still paying Daphne Joy $10,000 a month, even while she testified against him in court. I don't know if he was still paying it as of now, but I would think, whatever that is, and why he felt like he should still pay that, he was, and that is what that is. So, like I said, once again, so now the judge emphasized that the court is not assured that if released, these crimes would not be committed again. That's not up to the judge to decide whether they would be committed. No, you can't punish somebody on what they possibly might do if you release them. You have to usually go by the law. And so that's another reason why the defense team was arguing, like, hold on. We understand, but Sean P. Diddy Combs was not convicted of domestic violence. He was convicted of two prostitution charges, which they call the Mann Act, ladies and gentlemen, right? And so with that being said, this is where they're coming from. And, they might or might not be successful in their appeal, but they say they are going to appeal. So the message was clear. Accountability over celebrity. I don't think that that's the underlying narrative. Accountability over celebrity. I think once again, Diddy apologized. He said he was wrong. He apologized to Cassie. Apologized to Jane. And like I said, them being worried about he would do something to them, you can't hold somebody in jail. Say, you know what? Well, if that's the case, you can hold him in jail for the rest of his life. Because, I don't think he'll come out and be whatever. So I'm going to hold him for the rest of his life. That's not the law, ladies and gentlemen. That's somebody's emotions. That's somebody's personal feelings. That's not how it should be looked at. You know what I mean? I don't think you've learned your lesson yet. You know what I mean? And so you're basically punishing somebody based on your emotions and your feelings, and not based on the guidelines that would be applicable to that person under the law, based on first-time offender, based on all of the things that one should be considering at that particular time. Just looking at the case as it is, what he's charged with, what the normal guidelines have been, like I said, once again. And that was Diddy's defense team arguing. They said that's why the prosecution was arguing for 135 months and saying that, and hopefully, like a negotiation tactic, and hopefully the judge would kind of go in with half. Well, the judge went in with less than half. He went with 50 months. That left, 85 months, right? On the other half. So 50, 85, 135, if you will, right? And so, yeah, this is where he came down. But here's the thing. The statement goes beyond the charges, right? It implies a pattern of behavior. And in law, you can't sentence someone for what you think they might do. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. You can't sentence somebody for what you think they might do. And I think he might do it again, so I ain't gonna let him out. You can't do that, right? That's unfair. That's unconstitutional. And that's what Diddy's team is arguing, right? You sentence them for what has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think Diddy's legal team has it. And so when you go, and also when you go in front of the appeals court, it's 3 judges. Usually it's 3 judges. So you're not just having one judge. So the bite at the apple is a little bit more, or appears to be a little bit more fair, if you will, because each judge has to, and usually with the appeals court, they don't really go by, what they're feeling about certain things. They usually go by the law and go by the words that are, spoken and what has been tried in the court. And they usually go by the law and feeling like, hey, you know what? This was unfair. We're passing this back down to the circuit for him to be resentenced, or whatever other decision that the appeals court comes up with. So, like I said, once again, so it raises questions. Did Diddy get a fair sentence, or was this about making an example out of him, right? Which Diddy spoke about in his final statement, because he was the last person to speak. And like I said, I felt like, like I said, once again, when you have so much, he's never been in a situation like this where he's been locked up and taken away, you know what I mean, from all that he had and all of the power and the influence and things that he's had. So, I don't know whether he's learned his lesson or not, but I think the things that are most important to him, he really truly misses. And like I said, I think it's humbled him a little bit. I think, like I said, what his legal team was recommending was adequate. Like I said, once again, and saying about 20 months, you know what I mean? They were also, like I said, recommending drug rehab, domestic violence classes, program, whatever, right? So Diddy's remorse and image rehab. So during his sentencing, Diddy got emotional. He said, quote, "We accept responsibility for the domestic violence. We own that since day one, but that's not what I was convicted of," right? So even in remorse, he's separating what he did from what he was punished for. You understand what I'm saying? His lawyers say he's changed, that the prison time already broke him down, destroyed his brand, and that more time won't help in rehabilitation. I didn't think so either. I don't think that, you putting him in jail for more, we're going to teach him a lesson, and it's trying to make an example out of him versus the average Joe or John who wouldn't even have the money to be able to defend themselves like Diddy has vigorously, in this situation, right? But like I said, here's where it gets interesting. Public opinion don't believe he's changed. Some people, like I said, social media are still, lighting him up daily. You got Tisa Tells out here still telling her stories from these spaceship point of views, and the damage to his reputation, his businesses, and his legacy. That's already its own life sentence in the court of public opinion. I don't think Diddy will ever be able to get back, you know what I mean, like he once was, if you will, right? So like I said, when you think about this, tell me what you guys think in the comments, because this is a very complex situation. And like I said, be careful about what you wish for somebody else. You have to be very careful, because this now goes into the law. And somebody saying, hey, I was forced to do this, or, he made me do that. When once again, the testimony at trial didn't say that they were forced to do anything, right? Cassie had another boyfriend. She was dealing with Kid Cudi. All of these things that came up that were facts that came up seemed to be ignored when it came time for sentencing. It seems that if one part of what, the court wanted to focus on was the focus of that and not the totality of what that was. Like I said, once again, like I said, I felt like the Cassie tape was a hurdle to get over. But when you break it down lawfully, Diddy wasn't convicted of domestic violence. So that shouldn't have been heavily considered like that, but it seems like that it was, right? So here's the straight game on it, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you like Diddy or not, this case is about to be about the system and consistency, if you will. Like I said, if the jury said not guilty on certain charges, then the sentence should reflect that, right? Period. Otherwise, what's the point of a trial? You got to ask yourself that. Like I said, if the jury has said not guilty on certain charges, then the sentence should reflect that, period, point blank. Otherwise, what's the point of a trial? If somebody already basically has their mind made up of what they're going to do and not really consider what's been done and that's why we have a jury system, if you will, right? But this also shows, if you will, how fame works both ways. It can protect you, but it can also destroy you once the tide turns and people turn against you. Let's not forget, this man built an empire, shaped culture, and made history, right? But like Tupac said, right? You can't turn a sinner into a saint overnight. Those are Tupac words. You can't turn a sinner into a saint overnight. So the question is, does justice stop when the public is satisfied or when the evidence says enough? Like I said, you have to you have to chime in on that one. Like I said, tell us, what you think about that, right? Y'all let me know. Like I said, did the judge go too far, or did Diddy finally face accountability? Drop your comments, hit the like button, share this video if you rocking with Straight Game TV, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next episode we breaking down, other things in relation to this. Like I said, we got the Keefe D trial coming up in February, which is right around the corner, in the murder of Tupac Shakur, and where Keefe D's defense is that Sean P. Diddy Combs actually put $1 million hit on Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur, ladies and gentlemen. Diddy is going to be incarcerated for what we see to be that time. If anything else comes about, like I said, Diddy can also, let's be clear, be released from prison on an appeal bond, right? So let's keep our eyes posted and our ears glued to what's really going on, not the hearsay, not the garbage, not the people out here making speculative comments and statements and things that are not based in truth and fact, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, your boy Delray, Straight Game.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.